Oh, well, here we are. Let's just get into some summer tour talk. Well, a little bit. Phish is returning to Kentucky this year. They're going to play the Bourbon and Beyond Festival. They haven't been back to Kentucky since 1996. The Rupp Arena show, the officially released Rupp Arena show from November of 96. The last time they were there, Trey and Mike have been there somewhat recently with their side projects, their solo bands, I guess they are called. So we'll just start with the first trip in Louisville, as some may call it, at the Macaulay Theater, April 16th, 1993. And really a pretty strong show that was mostly held up, made strong by the set list itself. There was like nothing really extra special happened. The playing wasn't extra phenomenal or anything like that, like you might expect from 1993. Although this was April of 93, they made two trips into Louisville in 1993. This one being April, and then they returned in August of 93. So get out your heat shields for the August of 93 show. But we're still talking about this first show at the Macaulay Theater in April. And like I said, yeah, mainly it was about the great songs that were played. In 1993, they didn't have a lot of duds. And one song I specifically checked out was Rift, thinking that it would just be a complete burner. Well, that was not the case, you know. The Rift had a little bit of an issue. And then songs like Melt, Esther, Harry Hood were all good, but then like nothing like extra special. That took them up to an 11. And then it was cool to hear an early sample in a jar. The crowd was a little bit of a weird crowd. Lots of clapping at times that didn't necessarily make sense. Maybe a little bit of a delayed cheer for a song. And but overall, like a very good like early 90s Phish set. Not a lot of antics, not a lot of jamming. The only problem was the playing wasn't phenomenal, but otherwise really good set. You know, maybe a 3.5 to 4 out of 5, you know, a 7 out of 10, something like that. And then the same thing pretty much with the second set, although there was a little more jamming. There was even a moment of improv. Was it a moment of improv, or did Trey just break a string on Weekapaw Groove? The Mike's Groove was certainly my favorite part. They opened up both sets with rockers. Chalk Dust opened the first, Axilla opened the second, kind of ending the set with rockers as well. Cavern, Highway to Hell. Highway to Hell ended the second set. One of the guys on the road crew requested that one. Gumbo Encore. Somebody, I believe a fan requested Gumbo. Trey said they hadn't played it in a while, so they're going to wish us luck, basically, is what he said. And then after the Mike's Groove, and there was a good maze in there somewhere, an early curtain that was cool. Shouldn't say an early curtain. It's one of the earliest songs. But there was a cool curtain in there and a maze. That Mike's Groove. Oh, a pretty solid flub in the Lizard solo. Again, maybe the crowd's to be blamed, though. There was like, I don't know if they were balloons popping or firecrackers going off or what the noise was. Just lots of noise in this one. And like I said, the clapping, the delayed cheering, like Mike's, maybe 30 seconds into Mike's, everybody was like, yeah, Mike's. Somebody called him a bunch of bums before Gumbo, I think jokingly. Trey was like, well, you know, this is by request. We haven't played it in a while. And some guy just shouted out, play it, you bums. So then, so after the Mike's Groove that perhaps had a broken string, they get into some acoustic stuff, into a vacuum solo. Hold Your Head Up by Highway to Hell. I think maybe the crowd was just a little too rowdy. They were like, we're trying to be serious here, and you guys just aren't allowing it. So let's just have some fun. And then the Amazing Grace followed the Gumbo. So the first trip into Kentucky, I'd say, well, not a perfect show, not a 10 out of 10, a strong start to their career. Unlike kind of Boulder and Seattle, Portland, some of the shows and cities I've been looking at recently, they didn't always get off to a great start in these towns. The Macaulay Theater in Louisville, maybe like a 1.5 up. That Lizard's flub hurt. So let's just move on to August 15th, 1993. Now, the date should be a little bit of a giveaway. This was an outstanding show. In fact, overall, this was the best show that they have played in Kentucky, and the stash that they played on this night would arguably be, you know, I know Rupp Arena might have some things to say, and there's other stashes out there, but this is, to some people, this is like the stash, and, you know, it would be hard to argue that. You know, maybe the overall length of the middle section, the jam there, really, you know, look, I'm going to focus a lot on the stash. There was also They tied up the loose end of the free bird, the gumbo from that April show. The gumbo ended with this sort of free bird style ending, that sort of dun 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 dun. You know that part, how free bird ends. Well, you got an acapella free bird in this one. Also an outstanding tweezer. If it wasn't for the stash, this tweezer would probably be more talked about. Would have been the one you left the show remembering the most. There's also a Colonel Forbin, Famous Mockingbird. A lot of courage to play those. After the rowdiness of that April crowd, took a lot of courage to do a narrated song like those two. And then, so let's just get into the stash, really. Now, look, if you just took the opening part, the written part of Stash, the first 6 or 7 minutes or so of the song, it was one of the better ones. If you love Stash and that's all you listen to, like, that would have been a pretty good one, even if the rest were just sort of, normal. So then it breaks off and, as they're easing out of the maybe so, maybe not, it slowly starts to get into the jam. And it doesn't take too long, maybe the first minute or so, when the first real key point is Mike gets real loud. And then everybody just responds to that. It's almost like it's just going in a circle and everybody is just taking turns coming up with the next cool thing to play. And it turned into one of those things where it's like, is this a whole new song? Is this improvised? And it felt like a mashup of Gamehenge and Harry Hood. Just like nothing specific from either of those songs. But, and this is 93. We're well beyond that writing era. But, yeah, that's just how I would explain this jam. It was just like Harry Hood meets Gamehenge. And then the problem with it is that only went on for like 5 or 6 minutes. Once you get to like the 12 or 13 minute mark, it drastically quiets down, gets really eerie even. And at that point on the audience recording, you just hear a fan go, "Oh my God." And it was more a response to the whole thing, not just what was happening right in that moment. There's also a soundboard release of this, the officially released show, August 14th, 93, the live Phish volume, has this Stash as a bonus track. I recommend checking that out, both the audience version and really this whole show as well. And then the final, once they kind of get out of the jam and it's like, we're going to get back into Stash, they weren't fully back into it. Like the Stash theme was there and they were just like building that into total chaos. And then like, boom, they're Stash again and it gets a proper ending. And really, yeah, like I said, there was many more good things in this show, but I talked a little too much about that first show. This was an outstanding show from beginning to end, the one that is worth checking out, and then for sure, the Stash is like a must-hear if you have not heard it yet. So now we move on to 94 and 95, 96, and then we got to wait all the way till 2025. Shameful. Okay, so then we move on to October 10th, 1994, and this was probably the least impressive of the shows there. While it still had some things, part of this second set would be right up there with just about anything, but the first set really lacking. If a couple of those early shows, just outstanding set lists, this first set list, not very strong, although it did include a Stash Gaiuti back-to-back. They tried to dip back into the Stash well. Just wasn't happening this time. In fact, they didn't even really go for it. More acoustic stuff, I can handle a little bit of that, but the stuff before it better really be hammering home. A Chalk Dust After. But Sample in a Jar, okay, Divided Sky was in there. I forgot about that. And it was kind of cool to see Sample in a Jar develop a little bit. Just listen to one of the early ones earlier, and then now this one here, a year and a half later, whatever it is. So then that Sample in a Jar, Divided Sky opened the show. Not a bad opening. But then the Horror, Silent in the Morning, Sparkle. That's rough. And then Stash Gaiuti. Okay, now we're getting out of the rough. Now we get back in. Now we're getting into the acoustic stuff. Old Home Place, Jensig, Nellie Kane. Steve Cooley sat in on banjo, so which is cool, but this was my least favorite set for sure. I skipped through a lot of this. Then we get into the second set. Now, before it gets to the Fishman Madness, more Fishman Madness. Hold Your Head Up. Love You, Hold Your Head Up this time. No Bike. Set did end with a strong Slave to the Traffic Light as well. A weird tweezer in there. Said something in the notes about being one of the first certain style of improvised tweezers. I don't know about that. I'm not sure. I mean, but hey, I should trust these people more than I know. I don't know. These people on .net are better historians than I am. But then they went back to Maze, and then Esther was okay. But then just a lot of just okay stuff from this show. Even what should have been the highlight was that tweezer. It was all right. The Slave to the Traffic Light that ended it. So not a whole lot happening in this show, which was, After the momentum they had built in those first two shows, this one was a little bit of a letdown, but still not bad. Like I said, there was parts of that second set that were outstanding stuff. It's just the first set, maybe a little too many songs that I don't really love. And then after an all-timer stash, just to follow it up a few months later with an okay stash, perhaps a mistake made. Could you imagine being in the room and you're like, oh, here it comes again? Nah, man, you had to know. That was a noob thought. If you were like, here it comes again, you had to know better. There's some vets in the crowd, be like, dude, I'm going to get a beer. This stash is not going to equal the last stash here. All right. Boom. So now we are moving on. We're quickly rolling through the Kentucky shows now. Okay, maybe not. You've probably been here a while. Okay, so now we move on to October 29th, 1995. This one was a previous recap I did for channel member Wally P, and wow, it was really rough watching this. I was like, oh, cool, I have a recap of this show. I can just watch my recap. And I don't know what I thought. Like, I said some things about the show. I'm not very good at saying, like, what I like and what I don't like. I just blew right past Slave to the Traffic Light, which is one of my favorite songs. And then, so I just went and listened to Slave to the Traffic Light. It was okay. It wasn't anything special. It nearly ended the first set. We got an a cappella number afterwards. And then went right to the It's Ice Kung? What did I say? Kung? It's Kung. The It's Ice Kung, It's Ice, or Kung, whatever you prefer. It depends what day it is. I usually say Kung. That's what it sounds like they're saying to me. Kung. So, yeah, right when it's getting into that cool jam part in It's Ice, they just transition right into Kung and then get back into It's Ice. That was very cool. I loved it. I wish they did more of that now. I guess it just takes more practice, rehearsal, just creative thinking time with the band and stuff they don't spend as much time doing. And then this one leading up to Halloween, there were some Beat It teases throughout. That was a thing back then, again, something else we just don't get a lot of now, you know. So I don't know. I guess I'm starting to lose a little confidence here in this whole video because I just watched that recap, but man, hard to watch. I'm glad you guys sometimes enjoy this stuff because there's a split open and meld as well. Got jam charted. I was confused by that being jam charted and David Bowie not being jam charted. At least that's what I was trying to say. And then, man, I just recommended that video to new channel member Nolan, who this video's for. Surprised he didn't unjoin right then. All right, so boom. So this was, I don't know what I thought of this show. I thought I would just check out a lot of openers in the first set. I mentioned basically the entire first set felt like openers. Buried Alive, Poor Heart, Julius, Punch You in the Eye, Cars, Trucks, and Buses. They opened up with 5 consecutive openers. And then another Horse Silent in the Morning. What's going on with that song in Kentucky? Another gumbo. I described it as a throwaway gumbo. In fact, it was. The split open and melt was cool, but it wasn't, I'm not sure why it got jam charted. It was just a cool split open and melt, you know. Then opening the second set with Makisupa Policeman, maybe not the best way to go. We got a Mango song, stuff we don't get much of today. Lifeboy, which we're getting more of in 2025. So I don't really know what I thought about this show. Wally P said it was a hard ticket. 95, the band was blowing up. It was leading to Halloween. I believe it probably indeed was. Plus the stash they had played there previously. They had moved over to the Gardens at this point, the Louisville Gardens. They had moved on from the theater. They were at a theater and a theater. What's the difference between a theater and a theater? I know about the theaters of war, the Eastern Theater, but I don't know. They started out in a theater in Louisville, and then they ended up at a theater. Now they're in a garden. Next, Rupp Arena. Jamal Mashburn's Jersey hangs. I don't know if it does or not. It should. It's my favorite Wildcat ever, Jamal Mashburn. Boom. Moving on. We got one show to go, and it's Rupp Arena. And I think I know what we're going to spend a lot of time talking about in this one. If you've made it this far, thank you. I promise to get better. Probably not. This will be the lull in the show. This is like a Phish show. Like, started out pretty good, then things kind of started to suck, and then it ended okay. Hopefully I can end it okay. Hopefully we can get a strong set closer and a decent encore. Well, so now we move on to Rupp Arena, and I was looking to see if there was video of this bathtub gin or the You Enjoy Myself, and look what I found from almost 10 years ago. A very angry, I would call it, recap from F Zappa 20. This was like the Attitude Era. I don't know what was going on here. Maybe it was the pink walls. I don't know. I do not understand, but I'm just going to let her rip, and we will end the video with this, my Rupp Arena recap, I guess you could call this. Thanks to Nolan for the trip through Kentucky, and I would have to give it a 2 thumbs up. Everything they have done in Kentucky has been mostly good. Maybe 2 sets that weren't so great. Other than that, like an all-time show, a couple of all-time versions, a very good show. I don't know. I'm glad they're back. Here we go.
96, getting the live Phish treatment this time. Rupp Arena. The major Rick Pitino chompers in the house, I would have to imagine.
I'm sorry about the quality of this. This is the best I can do. I do not have the original file, believe it or not. This will be the last interruption. Boom.
Imagine. A lot of us know this show from the Bathtub Gin already. We'll go back to the first set, starting out with Chalk Dust Torture. That's opening up the first set instead of the second set like we get it nowadays a lot. Way and Riff, boy, I skipped Way the second time I listened to it today, but Riff, man, that's a song where they nail it. That's one I'm not skipping. This was a pretty hot riff. Galua Papyrus, Stash. That seems like a good combo. I like it when they put those 2 songs together, whatever order. Stash, man, Trey was ready to break out. He was jamming. Rockin' Trey, loud solos through Stash, didn't waste, all right. Gaiuti, I'm nothing against Gaiuti, but this one didn't really stand out as something I'm going to listen to over and over again. The Free, Trey got a little crazy with the effects, I was kind of excited about this Free, but then, I don't know, a little fuzzy. Wasn't too down with the Free. Tila, I'm always down for a good Tila. Trey needed another solo. They end the first set with Character Zero. I don't know, perhaps the Chompers were with me on that Free, and they were just like, what the fuck is going on? He hits them with a zero, man, keeping them happy. There was some alligator mouse here in the first set. Not too unusual back then. Susie Greenberg, that's how they open up set 2. Pretty normal Susie, nothing too crazy opening up set 2. But then, boom, they hit you with this Bathtub Gin. It started maybe 6 or 7 minutes in, you start to realize it's not going to be a normal Bathtub Gin. Then we get a little bit of fuzzy Trey. About the 15-minute mark, it changes over. Then we get some funky Page. Then we get them moments that I just love when the whole band just is kind of jamming as one, not necessarily just taking solos. Hangs on there, I don't know, what it go, 25, 26 minutes, something like that. And then how in the fuck do they go from that incredible 15, 20, 25 minutes of music to Hold Your Head Up, Bike, Hold Your Head Up with Fishman on vocals? That cat that's staying here with me, she bailed at that point. She was like, look, I can handle a few solos, some bluegrass, hit me with a waist, but when Fishman started singing, man, she bailed. I haven't seen her since. The vocal jam didn't help. That didn't bring her back, that's for sure. Turn the volume up, thought that might help. So at least they get serious again, man, and we get hit with a big YM to end the second set. Frankenstein encore, whatever. You've heard Frankenstein once, you've heard it fucking, that's all you need to hear it. This was nothing crazy. So the vocal jam, Jesus, man, it was like a 5-minute vocal jam. Vocal jam was longer than a few of the songs in the first set. So Free, was a bit of a letdown. Rift was hot. Chalk Dust come out smoking, come out hot. Go Tila, I'm a big Tila guy. Susie, seemed like a first set Susie to me. But then, boom, Bathtub Gin's probably why this show was released. That's why we're here, right? That and the Jamal Mashburn Chompers. I don't know. What was that? Maybe Antoine Walker those years. We're over 30 minutes, and we're talking about a show from 1996, guys. Thanks for watching.
Boom.